My mom begged me to come home for the holidays. After a 10-hour red-eye flight, I arrived at her door with bloodshot eyes and a suitcase full of grief, thinking I was about to nurse a sick woman back to health. Instead, she opened the door wearing a sequined gown and a face full of makeup. No hello, no hug, just a set of car keys thrown at my chest and a command that made my blood run cold. You will babysit your brother's kids. We are going on a family trip. My brother Trey laughed from the staircase, dragging a designer suitcase behind him. Don't let them wipe their snot on you, Simone. That blouse looks expensive. They all laughed. I just smiled and said one thing, and that was when they went crazy. My mom kept whispering, no, no, no way. But by then it was too late. If you have ever been the family ATM who finally decided to shut down the bank, stay with me until the end, because I am going to show you exactly how I turned their vacation into a nightmare they will never forget. My name is Simone. I am 34 years old and I make my living finding hidden money. As a forensic accountant, I track down fraud for major corporations. But apparently, I was blind to the biggest scam artist of them all, living right in my childhood home. 2 days ago, my phone rang at 3 a.m. It was my mother, Lucille, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She told me she was sick. She told me she was scared. She told me she needed her daughter. I booked the first flight out of Chicago to Atlanta. I canceled meetings. I didn't sleep. I just stared out the airplane window, praying I would make it in time. When the Uber pulled up to the house, my heart was hammering against my ribs. I expected a darkened room. I expected the smell of sickness. I expected to be the dutiful daughter one more time. Instead, the house was blazing with lights. Music was thumping from the living room, and when the door swung open, there stood Lucille, not in a hospital gown, but in a gold dress that shimmered under the porch light. She looked healthier than I had ever seen her. She didn't even look at my face. She looked at her watch. Praise God you are here, Simone. We were about to miss our flight. She shoved a set of car keys into my free hand. Take the kids to get pizza. There is nothing in the fridge. Trey and Ashley are packing the last of their things. I stood there frozen on the welcome mat. My suitcase felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Excuse me? I said, my voice hoarse from the flight. You said you were sick. You said it was an emergency. Lucille waved a manicured hand in the air, like she was swatting away a fly. Oh, that. The Lord healed me, Simone. I prayed and I was delivered. But now Trey and Ashley need healing. They are under so much stress. You know how hard it is raising 3 children? She leaned in closer, and I smelled expensive perfume instead of medicine. Since you are here, and you are single, and you have no children of your own, it is only right that you help. We are going to Cabo for a week. A family healing retreat. Just then my brother Trey walked down the stairs. He was wearing sunglasses indoors and carrying a Louis Vuitton duffel bag. Behind him was his wife, Ashley, looking at her phone. She didn't look stressed. She looked bored. Hey, big sis, Trey said with that lazy grin that used to make me melt when we were kids, but now just made my stomach turn. Thanks for stepping up. We really need this. Just try to keep the kids alive, okay? And do not let them wipe their snot on you. That blouse looks expensive. Is it silk? Ashley looked up and gave me a tight little smile. Thanks, Simone. You are so good with them anyway. And it is not like you had big plans, right? You are always just working. I dropped my suitcase. It hit the floor with a heavy thud that made them all jump. I blocked the doorway. My fatigue was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. I am not babysitting, I said. I flew here because Mom said she was dying. If she is fine, then I am leaving. I am going to a hotel, and then I am flying back to Chicago. Lucille gasped, clutching her chest. You would leave your own flesh and blood. You would ruin Christmas for your nieces and nephews. Simone, how can you be so selfish? After everything I have done for you. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the gold dress. I saw the fresh hair salon blowout. And then I saw the bag sitting on the entry table. It was a brand new designer handbag. The leather was pristine. I recognized the brand immediately because I had audited a company that sold them. That bag cost $3,000. 3 weeks ago, Lucille had called me crying, saying the roof was leaking and she needed $3,000 to fix it or the house would flood. I sent the money within the hour. There was no leak. There was only the bag. I looked at Trey. He was wearing new limited edition sneakers. Last month he told me he couldn't afford rent because he got laid off. I paid his rent. I looked at Ashley. She was wearing a diamond tennis bracelet. She told me 2 months ago they couldn't afford dental work for their oldest son, Leo. I paid the dentist directly. This wasn't a family. This was a parasite, and I was the host. I am not doing this, I said, my voice steady. I am not watching your kids while you go on a vacation paid for with my money. Ashley stepped forward, her face flushing pink. We already paid for the tickets, she said, her voice rising. They are non-refundable, Simone. We cannot cancel. You can't just show up and dictate our lives. We are parents. We need a break. You have no idea what it is like. You have your quiet little apartment and your big salary. You don't understand sacrifice. I laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound. I don't understand sacrifice. I paid for this house, Ashley. I paid for the car in the driveway. Don't throw money in our faces, Lucille snapped, stepping between us. Money is not love, Simone. Service is love. Sacrifice is love. If you love your family, you will do this small thing. I turned to grab the handle of my suitcase. I was done. I was walking out, and I was never coming back. But before I could turn the knob, 3 small bodies slammed into my legs. Auntie Simone. Auntie Simone. It was the kids. Jordan, who was 4, Leo, who was 6, and Bella, who was 8. They were still in their pajamas, even though it was afternoon. Their faces were sticky. Their hair was uncombed. Bella looked up at me with big, teary eyes. Mommy said if you didn't come, we would have to go to foster care while they went away. Please don't let them take us, Auntie Simone. My heart shattered. I looked up at Trey. He was smirking. He had told his own children they would go to foster care just to manipulate me. Lucille saw my hesitation and pounced. Look at them, Simone. Are you really going to walk out that door and leave them alone? We have to catch this flight. If you leave, whatever happens to them is on your conscience. I looked at the kids. They were innocent. They were victims of this dysfunction just as much as I was. They looked hungry. They looked neglected. If I walked out, Lucille would probably leave them with a neighbor, or worse, just to make her point. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of my mother's betrayal. Fine, I said. Go. Trey pumped his fist. Yes, I knew you would come through. You are the best sis. Lucille beamed, fixing her lipstick in the mirror. I knew you were a good daughter deep down. There is pizza money on the counter. We will be back in 5 days. Don't wait up. They rushed out the door like a hurricane of luggage and entitlement. I heard the trunk slam. I heard the engine start. And then they were gone. I locked the door and slid down against the wood, burying my face in my hands. The kids were already running back to the living room, screaming and turning the volume up on the TV. I felt trapped. I felt used. I felt like the biggest fool in the world. But then I saw it. Trey had left his iPad on the entry table in his rush. The screen was unlocked. A notification banner popped up at the top. Confirmation booking, Cabo Azul Resort, Ocean View Suite, 5 nights. Total cost $15,000. I stared at the screen. $15,000. How could they afford that? Trey had no job. Ashley worked part-time. Lucille lived on Social Security and my handouts. I tapped the notification. It opened the email. I scrolled down to the payment method. Paid with Visa ending in 8890. The world stopped. The noise of the kids screaming faded into a buzz. 8890. That wasn't Trey's card. That wasn't Lucille's card. That was my card. It was a secondary card I had given my mother 5 years ago for extreme emergencies only. Life or death situations. I thought I had set a limit on it. I thought I had locked it. But looking at the transaction history on the screen, my blood turned to ice. They hadn't just paid for the hotel. Delta Airlines First Class, $4,000. Neiman Marcus, $2,000. Liquor World, $500. Crypto Exchange, $5,000. I scrolled back. Months back, years back. The grocery bills, the gas, the clothes, the car payments. They had been living a 5-star life on a card I thought was dormant. I never checked that account because it was linked to a trust I set up for my future children. I just auto-paid the balance from my main account, never looking at the details because I trusted my mother. I stood up. My knees were shaking, but my hands were steady. I walked into the kitchen where the kids were fighting over a bag of stale chips. I looked at the mess. I looked at the empty fridge. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Trey to scream. I didn't call Lucille to beg for an explanation. I opened my banking app. Ashley thought I was the babysitter. Lucille thought I was the doormat. Trey thought I was the bank. They were about to find out that I was actually a forensic accountant, and I had just found the crime scene. I looked at the iPad one more time. They were in the air now. First class. Drinking champagne. Toasting to their cleverness. Enjoy the flight, I whispered to the empty room. Because when you land, you are going to wish you had never left the ground. I tapped the number for the bank's fraud department. I would not be just canceling the card. I would be canceling their entire lives. The silence that followed their departure was heavy but short-lived. As soon as the taillights of the SUV disappeared around the corner, the reality of the house crashed down on me. I turned around to face the living room, and it looked like a bomb had gone off. Toys were scattered everywhere. Half-eaten bowls of cereal sat on the coffee table, the milk turning warm and sour. The television was blaring cartoons at a volume that made my teeth ache. I walked into the kitchen, my heels clicking against the sticky linoleum floor. I needed to feed these children. I opened the refrigerator expecting to find at least the basics. Milk, eggs, cheese, maybe some fruit. It was empty. Not just low on groceries, but aggressively empty. There was a jar of expired mayonnaise, a shriveled lemon, and a single bottle of expensive champagne sitting on the top shelf. The pantry was just as bad, containing only a few bags of chips and sugary snacks. My stomach twisted. Lucille had claimed she was sick. She claimed she was dying, but she had clearly been well enough to clear out the food, or perhaps she just hadn't bothered to buy any in weeks. Auntie Simone. I looked down. Leo, the 6-year-old, was tugging on my blazer. His face was smudged with dirt, and he looked up at me with eyes that were far too old for his age. "We are hungry," Leo said. "Mommy said we couldn't eat until you got here. She said you would order us whatever we wanted." I crouched down, trying to keep my voice steady. "What else did Mommy say, Leo?" He shrugged, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "She said Grandma told her not to worry about groceries. She said Auntie Simone is rich. She said you have so much money you don't know what to do with it, so we should just make you buy everything." I stood up slowly, feeling the blood rushing in my ears. Rich. That was the narrative Lucille had spun. She didn't tell them I worked 80-hour weeks. She didn't tell them I spent my 20s studying for CPA exams while Trey was partying. She just told them I was a bottomless well of cash. It reminded me of Sunday dinners when we were kids. Trey always got the biggest piece of chicken. Trey got the new Jordans while I wore Payless knockoffs. Mom used to say Trey is a boy, Simone. He has different needs. He needs to look the part to get ahead. 30 years later, and nothing had changed. Trey was still getting the chicken, and I was still getting the bill. I ordered 3 large pizzas and a salad for myself using the app on my phone. While we waited, I tried to clean. I scrubbed dried juice off the counter. I gathered the laundry that was piled on the dining chairs. Every shirt I folded felt like a slap in the face. These were designer clothes. Tiny polo shirts that cost $50 a pop. How could they afford to dress their children like little princes while the fridge was empty? The math didn't add up. And as a forensic accountant, when the math doesn't add up, it means someone is lying. I got the kids fed and bathed. It took hours. By the time I tucked Bella into bed, it was past 10 o'clock. The house was finally quiet. I stood in the hallway listening to the hum of the heater and the settle of the floorboards. Most people would have gone to sleep. Most people would have collapsed from the exhaustion of the flight and the emotional whiplash. But I am not most people. I hunt financial predators for a living. And tonight the predator was sleeping in a 5-star hotel in Cabo, but she had left her trail right here. I walked down the hall to Lucille's home office. The door was shut. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room smelled like her lavender perfume and old dust. Her desk was a mess of papers, but I wasn't interested in the surface. I was interested in what she hid. I sat in her leather chair, the leather cold against my legs. I started with the top drawer. Junk, pens, paper clips, old church bulletins. I moved to the side drawers. Locked. I reached under the desk, feeling for the key. Lucille was a creature of habit. When I was 16, she used to hide her diary taped under the desk drawer. My fingers brushed against metal. Got you. I unlocked the bottom drawer and slid it open. It was packed tight with file folders. I pulled them out one by one, placing them under the desk lamp. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm. This was work. This was what I did. I separated my emotions from the data. The first folder was labeled Utilities. I opened it. Past due notices, final warnings, and then payment confirmations. I frowned looking at the account numbers. The payments weren't coming from Lucille's Social Security account. They were coming from an account ending in 4502. That was my emergency account, the one I sent $500 to every month for house repairs. I scanned the statements. She wasn't just using it for repairs. She was paying the electric bill, the water bill, the cable bill. She was paying for everything out of my emergency fund while her own money went somewhere else. I dug deeper. The next folder was labeled Tray. I opened it and a receipt fluttered out. It was from an orthodontist. $5,000 for invisible aligners for Leo. Paid in full. Below it was a credit card statement. I picked it up and my breath caught in my throat. It was a Visa statement. The name on the card was Simone Jenkins. I stared at the paper, my vision blurring. I had canceled this card. 5 years ago, when I bought my own condo in Chicago, I told Lucille to cut up the authorized user card I had given her for emergencies. I called the bank. I closed it. Or so I thought. I looked at the date on the statement. Last month. She hadn't just kept it open. She had forged my signature to reactivate it or to request a new card. I scanned the charges. It was a catalog of gluttony. Sephora $300, Foot Locker $400, Steakhouse dinner $200, liquor store $150, and then right at the top, the charge that made me nauseous. Expedia travel agency, $15,000. The date was 3 days ago. That was the Cabo trip. They hadn't just used my money, they used my credit. My identity. They had stolen $15,000 from me and then looked me in the face and told me to babysit. But that wasn't the worst of it. At the very bottom of the drawer, buried under a stack of church programs, was a thick envelope from a law firm. It was unopened, or maybe resealed. I slid a letter opener under the flap and pulled out the document. It was a notice of default. The house. The house I had grown up in. The house my father had left to both of us when he died. It was in foreclosure. I read the legal jargon, my hands starting to tremble. 6 months ago, a second mortgage had been taken out on the property. A home equity line of credit for $100,000. The document had 2 signatures, Lucille Jenkins and Simone Jenkins. I had never signed this. I had never been to a notary. I looked at the date. 6 months ago. Where was the money? Where did $100,000 go? I frantically searched the rest of the file. I found a printout from a cryptocurrency exchange platform. The account was in Trey's name. Deposit, $100,000. Current balance, $400. I put the paper down. The room felt like it was spinning. They had mortgaged the house, my house. They had forged my signature to get the loan. And then they had given the money to Trey, my useless golden child brother who wanted to be a crypto millionaire. And he had lost it all. Every single dime. The bank was scheduled to auction the house on January 5th, 2 weeks from now. Lucille knew. That was why she wanted to go to Cabo. She wanted one last hurrah before the hammer dropped. She wanted to live like a queen one last time before she was homeless. And she needed me here not to babysit the kids, but to be the one who answered the door when the sheriff came to serve the eviction notice. She was setting me up to take the fall, to be the one to clean up the mess. Again. I sat there in the silence of the dying house. The evidence was spread out around me like a coroner's report. They had stripped me clean. They had stolen my past by mortgaging the house. They had stolen my present by draining my accounts. And they had tried to steal my future by destroying my credit. My phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating against the wood. I picked it up. An Instagram notification popped up on the screen. Ashley had posted a new photo. I tapped it. The image loaded in high definition. It was a selfie taken from a first-class seat. Ashley was holding a glass of champagne, pouting her lips. Trey was next to her wearing an eye mask and grinning. Through the window you could see the clouds. The caption read, "Finally escaped the demons. Mama Bear needs a recharge. Thank you to the best mother-in-law in the world, Lucille, for making this happen. We are so blessed to have a family that supports us. First class, much blessed, family, first, Cabo bound, escaped the demons." She was talking about her children. The children sleeping in the other room with bellies full of pizza I paid for. The children who had cried because they thought they were going to foster care. And she thanked Lucille. She thanked the woman who had stolen from me to give to them. I looked at the timestamp. Posted 10 minutes ago. They were probably halfway to Mexico by now. High in the sky. Untouchable. I opened my banking app again. I refreshed the pending transactions. There it was. Delta Airlines. First class upgrade. $4,000. Pending. I looked at the number. Then I looked back at Ashley's smiling face on Instagram. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet, like a dry twig breaking in a winter forest. The part of me that was the dutiful daughter, the part of me that wanted their approval, the part of me that kept thinking if I just gave enough, they would finally love me. That part died right there in that chair. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone across the room. Instead, I felt a strange cold calmness wash over me. It was the same feeling I got right before I walked into a deposition to destroy a CEO who thought he had gotten away with embezzlement. It was the feeling of total control. I looked at the papers on the desk. The forged mortgage. The stolen credit card statements. The crypto loss. They thought I was just the babysitter. They thought I was just the wallet. They forgot who I really was. I am the person who finds the things people try to hide. And I am the person who makes them pay for it. I looked at Ashley's picture one last time. Enjoy the champagne, Ashley. Enjoy the legroom. Because that seat you are sitting in is the most expensive mistake you have ever made. I smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. A smile that would have terrified Lucille if she had been there to see it. I picked up the file folders and stacked them neatly. I wasn't going to sleep. I had work to do. By the time the sun came up, I would have a plan that would make this foreclosure look like a mercy. The sun rose over Atlanta, pale and cold, on the morning of December 23rd. I did not make coffee. I did not turn on the news. I sat at the dining room table, dressed in my sharpest business suit, with my laptop open and my phone charged to 100%. The house was quiet. The children were still asleep upstairs, dreaming of a Christmas that was about to change forever. I looked at the list I had made during the night. It was not a grocery list. It was a kill list. Not for their lives, but for their lifestyle. I took a deep breath. It was time to go to work. I dialed the number on the back of my credit card first. The automated voice asked for my reason for calling. I said fraud. When a human representative finally came on the line, I did not use my daughter voice. I used my forensic accountant voice, the voice that makes CFOs sweat in boardrooms. I need to report unauthorized activity on my Visa account ending in 8890, I said. The representative asked if the card was lost or stolen. I said no. I said the card is in the possession of family members who are using it without my consent. I am declaring every transaction in the last 48 hours as fraudulent. I want the card canceled immediately, and I want it flagged. The representative hesitated. Ma'am, if you flag it as fraud and the card is used again, the merchant will be instructed to confiscate it and potentially contact law enforcement. Are you sure you want to proceed? I looked at the picture of my mother and me on the mantel. I looked at the fake smile she wore while her hand rested on my shoulder, the same shoulder she had burdened with her debts for a decade. I am sure, I said. Burn it down. Next, I called the bank that held the mortgage on the house. This was a harder conversation. I had to speak to the fraud department specifically regarding real estate. I told them I was the co-owner of the property and that my signature on the home equity line of credit had been forged. I told them I was willing to submit a handwriting sample and testify in court. I told them to put an immediate freeze on the account and to halt the foreclosure proceedings pending an investigation into criminal identity theft. The loan officer sounded shocked. He asked if I realized that this would launch a criminal investigation against the other signer. The other signer was my mother. I know exactly what it means, I said. Please proceed. By 10 o'clock in the morning, I had frozen every asset that had my name attached to it. I had locked the credit bureaus. I had severed the financial arteries that kept the parasite alive. Now came the social surgery. I walked into the kitchen just as my phone began to ring. It was a FaceTime request from Lucille. I accepted it and propped the phone up against the fruit bowl. Lucille's face filled the screen. She was wearing big sunglasses and a sun hat sitting by a sparkling blue pool. A waiter was handing her a drink with a little umbrella in it. Good morning, sleepyhead, she chirped. The signal was a little grainy, but I could see the smugness radiating off her. Why aren't the kids at the park yet? I checked the weather there and it is beautiful. Don't tell me you're letting them rot in front of the TV. And Simone, when you get a chance, the kitchen floor needs a good mopping. Ashley spilled some juice before we left and it is sticky. I stared at her. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I am not mopping the floor, Mom, I said. Lucille lowered her sunglasses. Excuse me, what did you say? I said I am not mopping the floor. In fact, I am not going to be here to mop the floor. I just got an urgent email from work. They need me in London for an emergency audit. My flight leaves in 4 hours. Lucille dropped her drink. I heard the glass shatter on the concrete patio. People in the background turned to look. You are lying, she screamed. Her voice cracked. You are lying. You cannot leave. Who is going to watch the kids? You cannot leave 3 children alone in a house, Simone. That is illegal. That is child abandonment. I am not abandoning them, I said calmly, checking my watch. I solved the problem. Since Ashley and Trey were so stressed that they couldn't take care of their own children, I figured they would want the next best thing. So I called Ashley's parents. The color drained from Lucille's face. You did what? I called Mr. and Mrs. Miller. They were very confused, Mom. See, Ashley told them she was in the hospital getting a gallbladder surgery. She told them that was why she couldn't come to their house for Christmas. When I told them she was actually in Cabo drinking margaritas, they were quite surprised. Lucille was sputtering now. You spiteful little... They are on their way, I continued, cutting her off. They will be here in 20 minutes to pick up the kids. They are very eager to see their grandchildren, and I think they are going to be calling Ashley very soon to ask about her gallbladder. You fix this, Simone, Lucille hissed. You fix this right now. Do not let them take those kids. The Millers hate us. They will turn the kids against us. It is out of my hands. Mom, I said, I have a plane to catch. Oh, and one more thing. I wouldn't order another round of drinks if I were you. I hung up before she could answer. I didn't just end the call. I turned off my phone. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. It was the Millers. They were a nice older white couple who had always treated me with respect even though they despised Trey. They looked worried. I invited them in and explained that there had been a miscommunication and that I had to leave for work. I didn't tell them about the fraud. I didn't have to. The truth about Cabo was enough. They took the kids who were actually happy to see their other grandparents because the Millers always brought presents. I watched them drive away. The house was empty. The silence was absolute. I picked up my suitcase and walked out the door. I locked it behind me. I wasn't going to London, of course. I was going to a luxury hotel downtown where I had booked a spa suite for myself. I was going to sit in a robe-order room service and wait for the fireworks to start. The explosion happened at 8 o'clock that evening. I was sitting in my hotel room eating a steak and reading a book when I turned my phone back on. It vibrated instantly. 17 missed calls from Trey, 12 missed calls from Lucille, 5 missed calls from Ashley, and a string of text messages that ranged from begging to threatening. I let it ring one more time, then I answered. Simone. It was Trey. He wasn't using his cool guy voice. He was screaming. In the background, I could hear chaos. I could hear Ashley crying. I could hear a man speaking Spanish loudly. Simone, what did you do? Trey screamed. We are at the restaurant. We just ate a $500 dinner. They declined the card. I took a sip of my wine. Which card, Trey? Your card. The Visa. The waiter came back and said it was declined. He said to try another one. So Mom gave them her card. And that one was declined too. Simone, they are threatening to call the police. They think we are trying to dine and dash. I leaned back against the pillows. Well, Trey, that is unfortunate. But I am confused. Why are you using my card? I thought you were a big-shot crypto investor. Surely you have your own money. Don't play games with me, he yelled. Mom said the account is frozen. She called the bank and they wouldn't talk to her. They said the account holder flagged it for criminal activity. Fix it, Simone. Call them right now and tell them it was a mistake. Everyone is looking at us. It is humiliating. It is not a mistake, I said. My voice was ice cold. What do you mean? Trey asked. And for the first time I heard fear in his voice. I mean, I called the bank, Trey. I reported the transactions as fraud. Because that is what they are. You stole my card number. You forged my signature. You stole $15,000 for a vacation you can't afford. But we are family, he pleaded. You can't do this to family. Just unlock the card so we can pay the bill. We will pay you back, I swear. You will pay me back, I said. But not with a promise. You will pay me back when the court orders restitution. Simone, please. Ashley is crying. The manager is calling the cops. Good, I said. Tell the police the truth. Tell them you are thieves. Maybe they will go easy on you. But I doubt it. The Mexican police can be very strict about Americans coming down there and stealing from local businesses. Simone, don't hang up. Mom is fainting. She is having a panic attack. She is acting, Trey, I said. She is acting just like she acted when she said she was sick to get me to come home. Well, the show is over. I am not the audience anymore. I am the producer, and I am canceling the show. I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of the hotel room. I waited for the guilt to come. I waited for that familiar sinking feeling that told me I was a bad sister, a bad daughter. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt lighter. I felt clean. I poured myself another glass of wine. I imagined them there in the restaurant surrounded by angry waiters, unable to leave, unable to pay their credit, destroyed, their lies exposed. It was a cruel thing to do, some might say, but they had spent 30 years teaching me that money was the only language they understood. So finally I decided to speak it back to them. I took a sip of wine and watched the city lights of Atlanta twinkle below me. Merry Christmas, family, I whispered. The bill has finally come due. It took them 2 days to get back. 2 days of sleeping in airports, begging strangers for phone chargers, and selling their designer luggage for pennies on the dollar just to buy economy tickets. When they finally pulled up to the driveway, they didn't look like the royalty that had left. They looked like refugees from a disaster they had created. I was sitting in the living room waiting for them. The house was perfectly silent. On the coffee table in front of me sat a single thick red file folder. It was the only thing in the room that mattered. The front door flew open with a bang. Lucille marched in first. Her hair was a matted mess. Her expensive dress was stained and her eyes were wild with a mixture of exhaustion and pure rage. Trey and Ashley trailed behind her, dragging garbage bags that held whatever clothes they hadn't sold. They looked broken. But Lucille was not broken. She was furious. She saw me sitting there calm and collected in my blazer, and she snapped. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask about the house. She launched herself across the room like a missile. "You ungrateful little witch," she screamed, reaching out to slap my face. "You left us there. You tried to kill your own mother." I didn't flinch. I didn't cower. I waited until her hand was inches from my cheek, and then I caught her wrist. I gripped it hard enough to make her gasp. I stood up slowly, towering over her, still holding her hand in the air. "Don't you ever raise your hand to me again," I said. My voice was low and dangerous. "I am not the little girl you used to bully into submission, and I am certainly not the bank you can rob and then beat when the funds run dry." I shoved her hand away. She stumbled back, rubbing her wrist, looking at me with shock. She had never seen me fight back, not once in 34 years. Trey stepped forward, trying to summon some of his old arrogance, but his voice shook. "You are sick, Simone. You humiliated us. Do you know what it was like begging for food in an airport?" I looked at him. I looked at the man who had stolen my credit, my trust, and my parents' love. "Sit down," I commanded. They froze. I said, "Sit down." They sank onto the sofa, the same sofa they had laughed on just days ago. I picked up the red folder and dropped it on the table. It landed with a heavy thud that echoed in the silent room. "I know everything I said." "What are you talking about?" Lucille muttered, avoiding my eyes. I opened the folder. I laid out the documents one by one like a tarot card reader dealing out a death sentence. First, the mortgage papers. "Here is the home equity line of credit for $100,000, I said, pointing to the signature. "That is not my signature, Mom. That is a felony called forgery." I laid down the next paper. "Here are the credit card statements for the last 5 years. The card I told you to destroy. The card you used to fund your lifestyle while I ate ramen noodles and worked double shifts." I laid down the last paper. "The crypto account. The one where Trey lost every single cent of the equity you stole from this house." The room was so quiet you could hear them breathing. Ashley looked at Trey, her eyes wide. "You lost it," she whispered. "You told me you doubled it." I ignored her. I looked straight at Lucille. $250,000, I said. "That is the total. That is what you have stolen from me. That is grand larceny. That is mortgage fraud. That is identity theft. And in the state of Georgia, that carries a mandatory prison sentence of 10 to 20 years. Lucille's face turned gray. "You wouldn't. I am your mother." I picked up the last document in the file. It was a letter addressed to the district attorney. "I have already drafted the complaint," I said. "The evidence is certified. The forensic audit is complete. All I have to do is drop this in the mailbox, and by tomorrow afternoon the police will be here to arrest all 3 of you." Trey started to cry. A pathetic sobbing sound. "Simone, please, I can't go to jail. I have kids. You should have thought about your kids before you stole their aunt's identity," I said. "But because I am not a monster, because I actually care about those children more than you do, I'm going to give you a choice." I pulled 2 legal documents out of the folder and slid them across the table. "Option 1, I said. We go to court. I press full charges. You all go to prison. The children go into the foster care system immediately because the state will see that you are unfit parents who involve their family in financial crimes." Ashley let out a strangled noise, clutching her chest. "Option 2, I said. You sign this." I tapped the paper on the right. "This is a quitclaim deed. It transfers full ownership of this house to me. Effective immediately. This second paper is a repayment plan for the credit card debt garnished from your future wages. And here is the rest of the deal." I continued looking at Lucille. "You move out. Today. I have found a nice state-funded assisted living facility for you 2 towns over. I will pay the deposit, Or you can go live with Ashley's parents if they will have you. But you will not live here. This house is mine. It is the only asset I have left to recoup my losses." Lucille stared at the paper. "You are kicking me out of my own home." "It hasn't been your home for 6 months, Mom," I said. "It belongs to the bank. And now it belongs to me if I choose to save it from foreclosure. And you," I said, turning to Trey, "you need to get a job. A real job. Not crypto. Not a scheme. You are going to work, and every month a check will be sent to me to pay off that credit card. If you miss one payment, just one, I file the police report." The silence stretched on for an eternity. Then Ashley stood up. She grabbed the pen from the table. "Sign it," she screamed at Trey. "Sign the damn paper, Trey." Trey looked at her shocked. "Ash, wait. You lied to me," she yelled, hitting him on the shoulder. "You told me you had money. You told me your sister was just helping out. You stole from her. You almost got us arrested in Mexico. I am not losing my kids because you are a loser. Sign the paper." She looked at me. "I will sign whatever you want, Simone. Just don't call the police. I am taking the kids to my parents' house. I am done with this. I am done with him." Trey looked at his wife, then at his mother, then at me. He realized he had no allies left. With a shaking hand, he picked up the pen and signed the deed. Lucille sat there trembling. She looked small. She looked old. She looked at the pen like it was a knife. "How can you do this to me?" she whispered. "I gave you life, and you tried to take mine," I said softly. "You took my financial life. You took my emotional life. You took my trust. Now I'm taking it back. Sign the paper, Mom. Or I make the call." Slowly, painfully, she signed her name. I took the papers and put them back in the red folder. I stood up. "You have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings," I said. "Leave the furniture. Leave the electronics. Those were bought with my money. Take your clothes and get out." I walked to the door and held it open. 1 hour. The next 60 minutes were a blur of frantic packing and shouting. Ashley left first, taking the kids and peeling out of the driveway without even saying goodbye to Trey. Trey left next, stuffing his clothes into a garbage bag, refusing to look at me. Lucille was the last to leave. She stood in the doorway holding her Bible. She turned to me, and for a second I thought she might apologize. I thought she might say she loved me. Instead, she narrowed her eyes and raised the Bible in the air. "Honor thy father and thy mother," she spat out. "That is the commandment, Simone. You are going to hell for this. You are throwing your mother onto the street. God will punish you. You will never be happy. You will die alone because you chose money over family." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had manipulated me since I was a child. The woman who taught me that love was transactional. I smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "I think you skipped a few verses, Mom," I said. She frowned. "Exodus 20:15, I said. "Thou shalt not steal." I stepped closer to her. And Proverbs 13:22. "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children." "You didn't leave me an inheritance, Mom. You left me a crime scene." I pointed to the driveway. "God sees everything, Mom, including the bank statements. Now get out of my house." She opened her mouth to speak, but saw the look in my eyes and closed it. She turned and walked out to the taxi I had called for her. I watched the car drive away. I watched the taillights fade into the distance. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I turned around and looked at the empty living room. It was silent. But it wasn't the lonely silence of the past. It was the silence of peace. The house was empty, but for the first time in my life, I was full. I didn't keep the house. It had too many ghosts. I sold it 3 months later to a nice young couple who didn't know the history in the walls. I used the money to pay off the debts they had racked up in my name. I cleared my credit. I cleared my conscience. I moved to London a year later. I started my own firm. I don't talk to them anymore. Sometimes I get a text from a random number asking for money or quoting scripture, but I just block it. People say blood is thicker than water, but they forget that blood can also stain. Sometimes you have to wash it out to finally get clean. I stood on the balcony of my new apartment looking out at the London fog, sipping tea from a cup I bought with my own money. I was alone, but I was free. And that was the richest I had ever felt. We often believe that being a good family member means sacrificing ourselves until there is nothing left. But Simone's journey teaches us a hard truth. You cannot buy respect, and you cannot finance real love. When relatives use family as a weapon to manipulate and steal, they are the ones breaking the bond, not you. Walking away from toxicity isn't an act of betrayal. It is an act of self-preservation. Your peace is worth more than their approval. You are not a bank account. You are a human being deserving of care, not just transaction fees. If you agree that your peace is priceless, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.